for people who are poor, it's because they actually don't see reality for what it is. Because the way they see reality, they see making money to be impossible or incredibly difficult, or it's only for a certain select people, not for them. Right? And it's just because they...
I think you gotta have a dream.
The School of Greatness.
Really? Yeah.
Please welcome Lewis Howes.
I feel like a lot of society keeps people kind of trapped in this broke mindset. It's hard to kind of get ahead, right? Because of people investing in things when they don't have money, so they're in debt, and they kind of stay in debt. What is necessary for people to break the broke mindset that society has kind of trapped people in that keeps them poor?
So I think like people have two sets of resources, right, that they allocate. So they've got time and they've got money.
Yeah.
And so if you look at someone's bank statement and you look at their calendar, you know what their life is. And you can also predict where their life is going to be in X amount of years, right? And so if someone wants to change what their life is going to look like, you have to reallocate where you're investing the resources that you have. And so from a time perspective, people who are poor, in my opinion, spend a lot of time not doing stuff. And that sounds terrible to say, but like at the base level, they're distracted, they're
not doing the right
procrastinating.
stuff.
Right. Well, I would even say not doing anything.
Just distracting them,
Right.
playing
Just
video games,
Netflix, et cetera, all that stuff, right? So there's like the basis, like they don't do anything. They're purely distracting themselves from their current state, which is hard because it's hard to confront reality. If you're like not happy, it's easier to just distract yourself, right? Now, the level above that is you've got people who are operating, they are working every day, but they're operating in low leverage opportunities, right? So they're doing things that do not give them a lot of return on their time, right? And so it's like I could work, it doesn't matter how many hours I work at McDonald's, it's very, very difficult to become wealthy there, right? It's just near impossible, right? Versus like you could buy a building for $10 million and then sell it to somebody else for $11 million, just get the contract and make $1 million on the exchange. Super high leverage, right? From a time perspective, which is crazy for somebody who doesn't have money to even contemplate something like that. But the only way that happened, and that required no money, is skill, right? And so like that's an example of like it didn't require money to make that money. That's skill that's required to do that. And so first is the time, right? People are not doing stuff with the time that they have, or they're doing low leverage activities with the time they have. And then they're not trying to increase their output per unit time, which means investing in their skill set. So like one of the easiest ways to gain leverage on your time, and when I say leverage, just for everybody, like leverage is the difference between inputs and outputs in a system. So, Archimedes said, if you give me a lever long enough, I can move the world. And so to the same degree, if you have enough skills, you can do anything, right? And so skills give you leverage on your time. So you get more out of each unit of time. So if I'm a master cold caller, I will get more sales and calls booked for the same unit of time than somebody who sucks at it. Same time, more output. Right.
But because they developed a skill at a masterful level.
100%.
Yeah.
And so when people are allocating their time, they're not by percentage, they're kind of like consuming their time rather than investing their time. So they're either doing nothing or they're consuming the time rather than putting time into getting higher returns on their time, which is education, right? And so education you can have from like the conceptual learnings, watching stuff like this, or the actual doing, right? And so you learn
taking
more
action,
100%.
Failing, messing up, feeling like an embarrassment in the actions. Yeah.
The first 1,000 cold calls you make, the first 1,000 cold emails you do, the first 1,000 doors you knock on, the first 1,000, you'll learn more from that than you'll learn from every single book you read up to that point on the concept. You'll learn, right? And so people don't allocate nearly enough time to that in the beginning. And so I think one of the things that the formal education system did really well, that people poo-poo on it, is the idea of going into debt to gain education is something that fundamentally makes sense.
Yes, but it's got to be the right education that can make you money.
You got to get a return on it.
Yes.
That's the issue, right? You have to get a return on it because like the idea of borrowing from a future self that can make more money to pay for the thing that you're getting the skill for makes total sense. I think Elon was saying something about how Neuralink in the future, it's going to be such a competitive advantage that they could price it at whatever they want, because once you have it, you'll be so much more able than anyone who doesn't have it that you could so easily pay off the price of the thing. That's how it should work conceptually, right?
Crazy.
So education is supposed to work.
Yes.
And so this is the simplest example that I have. So a friend of mine has a 17-year-old daughter. She got a job at a bowling alley and she makes minimum wage. And he said, why don't you become a phlebotomist? And she was like, well, I don't want to spend the money. He's like, it's $500 and it's a 2-day certification. And then after you have that, you make $25 an hour. So she didn't have the money. Now she could save it to get the $500, right? Or she could take a loan for the $500 from her dad and pay it back in a week.
Right.
right? Because she has higher earning capacity. And so it was like she could either save for 8 weeks, right, from her bowling alley to pay the 500, or she could take a loan for the 500, do the 2 days, and then pay it off in a week. So at that 1 week, she now has 7 more weeks of earning capacity. This is a micro example,
Yes.
right? 7 more weeks of earning capacity at her new level, and she'd be net positive on the next 7 weeks of earnings, right? And so that's just a micro example of like what skill investing does. And so that, because a lot of us talk about like, you got to get educated, you got to learn stuff, and like you learn stuff by doing it. And a lot of times you pay for that education or access to people who can teach you those skills, because a lot of people aren't going to give it to you for free. And that makes sense. It's okay.
Right,
Like it took them time to learn the thing, and they compressed that time to give it to you. So I mean, that's why I'm if there's one thing that's my like life's mission, it's education. And so
I was telling my coaching students last night on a call that I had with them that I have multiple coaches that someone was asking about mentors. Like, how do you find mentors? How often do you stay in touch with them? And I was like, listen, when I was broke, whatever it was, 15 years ago, just getting started in this space, I was lucky enough that I had a couple local mentors in Columbus, Ohio, that kind of had pity on me, but they saw that I had this hunger, this desire. I was like, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And then I came back 2 weeks later and I was like, I did it. Here's the results. Here's where I failed. And that's a fuel for mentors to be like, I gave you wisdom, you took action, you got results. I'll give you some more feedback. But if you just keep asking and you don't act, we talked about this with a mutual friend we have, it's frustrating for a mentor. They don't want to give you that time.
no.
And I told him, I go, this is why I pay mentors. You know, there's a big guy in media that has a massive business that I messaged him. I'm an acquaintance with him. I said, hey, I would love to pay you for some coaching. He said, I'll just do it for you for free for 30 minutes. Now, I want to pay him because I want to be able to do it more frequently. He said, I'll give it to you for 30 minutes because he likes me, we're friendly, but I know I can't call upon him for 30 minutes every week. So now I'll go back in 6 months and say, I took action on everything you said in that 30 minutes. Here's our results. Can we do another call? And that's kind of like what you can expect with a mentor, is that type of opportunity, unless you have a serious bond and they just want to give with their time. But investing in it, like you said, is so much more powerful in getting that speed of information, in my opinion.
Totally. The single highest return on investment thing I've ever done, and not to sound trite here, but I just like using scenarios. Like if I had taken all the money that I had spent on coaching, mentorships, courses, workshops, seminars, and put that in the S&P 500 when I, 10 years ago, right? The amount that I would have right now is inconsequential compared to what I currently have. And it's because I invested in something different. So rather than investing in the S&P 500, I invested in the S&P 500. So I took all of the excess cash that I had every single month, and rather than saying like, oh, I'm at a dollar cost average, I'm long term, I wait 40 years, whatever. I was like, I just don't make enough money. So like I could be the millionaire next door who saves every penny, doesn't go to Starbucks for my entire life, and have $2 million when I'm old, or whatever.
For the last 10 years of my life.
Right, and literally enjoy nothing during that period of time. That doesn't sound like this. It's not a trade I wanted to make. And so I had a belief that I know I will work hard, and if I'm given the right tools, I will be able to implement them. And so I took all my extra money, and this is kind of, a lot of people might not necessarily agree with me on this, but it worked for me. So I put all of every dollar I had, even went into debt, to get access to communities and mentors and coaching programs and masterminds.
Yes.
And those were the biggest gifts of all. And it wasn't even just in this, like the biggest gifts I got from those wasn't even the education, but it was the perspectives on reality. It was people disproving things that I thought to be true. So I was like, this is the way the world is. And they were like, that's false. And my whole paradigm shifted because I had distortions of reality. I thought reality was different than it was. And so right now for people who are poor, it's because they actually don't see reality for what it is. Because the way they see reality, they see making money to be impossible or incredibly difficult, or it's only for a certain select people, not for them, right? And it's just because they literally cannot see it. And so I'm trying to think of an example of when like you can see something that, an easier example is like kids and parents, right? Like a kid thinks the world is a certain way and the parent's like, you just haven't seen enough stuff yet. And so, as you level up in the entrepreneur space, there's also just more levels of that where other people are like, this is the perspective you need to have. And you're like, no way, that's possible. And so that's where those rooms gave me the highest ROI. The other skills, because there's so many people there that are trying to learn the same things, they already said, hey, get this program, read this book. And so they helped sift through the mountain of information that's out there because I only have one resource, which is time at that time, right? And so it's like, okay, I'll spend it, but where do I spend it? And they were like, okay, if you want to learn real estate, these are the top 3 guys. You can join this Facebook group, get into this guy's community. He has a coaching program that helps you do wholesaling. This guy's a coach that does Airbnbs. This guy does, and so it's like, which one do I choose? The answer for everybody who's curious is do them all. Because you're just like, you're not, like people are like, which one should I do? I'm like, you're not going to be poorer by learning more.
Right.
Right? And then it's not like you have a finite capacity to learn. The more you learn, the better you get at learning. Right? And then the more lines and synergies you find between different skill sets and opportunities.
The more dangerous you become.
100%.
If you just learn cold calling, but you didn't also learn, copywriting and email marketing or speaking on stage, it's the combination of multiple skills that make your earning power so much greater.
I'm literally getting goosebumps. Dude, I love it. It's the compound.
Yes.
And so I have this example where I break down Jay-Z, right? And so if you look at Jay-Z in the beginning, like he probably had a natural proclivity for rhyming and beat or rhythm, whatever, right? So that was his first like kind of skill. He probably practiced that a little bit because he was into it, right? And then he started rapping, right? So that was his first level skill. And then he learned, writing lyrics. And it's like, okay, so that's another
producing,
skill. Right. And exactly. Then he learned producing. And then he learned marketing. And then he learned
performing on stages or something.
Yes. And then he learned how to sign other people to his, how to start a label. And then he started learning. And so with each of these skills, it wasn't 1 + 1. It was like 1 + 1 + 1 = 10. Right. And so like in a formal world, like the world that's not rap, like if someone's good at math, they can learn accounting or bookkeeping first. Right. It's like, okay, that's a level 1 skill. And then you learn accounting. Okay, now you're making more. And then you learn how insurance works. And you're like, oh, okay, now you can start to see this person evolve. And then you learn how tax and tax efficiencies work. And you're like, oh. And then you learn how to package and sell businesses and negotiate those deals with, private equity and things like that. All of a sudden, that's a CFO. That's somebody who's making multiple $1 million a year, but it's the same basic few skills that stack on top of each other and get disproportionate returns on all the prior skills with each new additional skill.
Yes.
And so the idea is not, like people ask the wrong question when they're like, which course should I buy? Which program should I do?
It's yes.
Do them all.
It's yes.
Do them all.
Yes to all, yeah.
Yeah, you want, like, because each one of them you will learn things. And there's going to be either different ways that someone's teaching, they'll have different communities, they'll have different beliefs, you'll learn from all of them.
And this is something